Martavis Bryant, obviously the news of the day. Is this news or is this August 13th news?
No, I think it's news considering his story and, what he's been through over the last decade, really. So, yeah, I think it's news, not whether he latches onto the roster and has a significant impact. I don't know that you can really have those expectations quite yet. I mean, right now it's just sort of a chance and see where it goes. But yeah, I think it's news. He was a notable player in 14, 15, 17. So
yeah, to me,
do you think it's like many people on the stream and social media, they think this is a big deal, it's a message being sent to people, or is this just them saying, let's see if this guy still has it?
I think it's just that. Let's see if this guy has it. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that they need like a bigger bodied receiver, a bigger guy. And Bryson Tremaine, I think, has started to come on in camp, but to have a guy with his size, his catch radius, I mean, why wouldn't you just take a flyer on him, see what he can do? I mean, he got an early glimpse at him while he was on scout team in Dallas, and I think he got like an early scout team honor or something from Dallas, like player of the week on scout team when he was with them. So, he still looks like he can play. I mean, he's 32 at this point, hasn't been in an NFL game in since 2018, but
that's crazy.
He's dropped more than 20 pounds, and he still looks like he plays every day.
I thought just looking at him, and perhaps that's overly simplistic, but that's like the first step is looking and seeing if the guy looks the part. He did. And even watching him run a little bit, like run some routes. How about this? I would say generally a guy getting signed on August 13th to a roster has roughly about, we'll be generous here, a 5 to 10% chance of making a roster, of making the final 53. Like it's a long shot when you get signed this time of year. Now,
right.
There are like positional exceptions or injuries that force stuff, but just in general, you got about a 5 to 10% chance of making the team.
Yeah.
Martavis Bryant feels more 15-ish% chance of making this team. Does that sound right to you? And what does that say about the receiver group?
Well, I think this was one of the most open positions going into camp. And like even now, I think there's 4 guys, really, 5 guys, maybe. So there is an open spot or 2 there. Terry, Jahan, I think Zacchaeus has a good chance of making it. Diami, Luke McCaffrey. So they keep 6. There's an open spot. Now, do they go bigger body receiver? Do they go somebody who can double as a returner? That's how the special teams factors in, could, sort of affect his odds there. But, then at that point, it's more of, do you want to try to get him on a practice squad? Can he clear waivers? And then, once he's on the practice squad, he's a free agent, really. Any team can sign him to their active roster at that point. So there's, some considerations. I think it's also worth noting that he's been available up until this point, and another team hasn't signed him. So maybe they feel like they could get him on practice squad and continue to work with him and see what he has there. And if not, they get some really good defensive work against a bigger receiver. So I don't think there's any downside in taking a chance on him. And if he looks anything close to the receiver he looked like in, 17, fantastic.
Yeah. Nicki, we've watched our receiver position, and we can see guys who seem to be making the plays, and the coaches seem to talk about them a lot. Other guys who we expect to make plays have not been making them. Mm-hmm. Are you think they need to see more, or they should be bringing some other people in here?
It depends on what they're looking for, I guess. I mean, do they need to see like Jahan Dotson makes, some splashy catches to really know what he can do? I don't know the answer to that, honestly. I don't know exactly what they're looking for. They've kept it pretty close to the vest, but I think they have a good feel of what he can do. I know they certainly have a good feel of what Terry can do, and Terry has made some really strong catches. I think for guys that were more on the bubble, guys like Diami, I mean, he really helped himself in this camp. And then there are guys that you could argue probably didn't help himself so much. I would look at, like Emmanuel Forbes. I don't know that last week really helped him. But, it's all sort of relative, I guess. Where do they see him fitting in this defense? Can they find a way to maximize his skill set instead of eating $12 million in dead money? So, I think I hate saying this because it's so vague and boring, but it's kind of all circumstantial with every player.
Totally. I think every player, every situation is unique. And then you go one step further and for all the consternation, I think largely fan driven about a guy like Jamin Davis. Mm-hmm. I think the staff kind of likes Jamin and the different things he can do. And then you add on Jordan McGee just got hurt. And we don't know the severity of it, but I would guess he ain't playing Saturday night in Miami. You know what I mean? That just there's going to be changes throughout this thing that continue to make the rosters just it's nebulous as we get closer to cut down day.
Right. And with Jamin, I mean, I thought he showed a lot of good things in that game. The back-to-back tackles he had, I thought were really strong plays from him. And they're trying to see all that he can do. They've used him at linebacker. They've been trying him more at the edge. They really got him working with Ryan Kerrigan after practice and before practice. And, I mean, the reality is the guy's like a physical freak. You don't find that every day, even in the NFL. We know he didn't have a ton of development in his first few years in the league. He's on an expiring deal now. So you use the season to really see what he can do. I frankly, at this point, I think it kind of makes sense to keep him. I think you can still get something out of him. And if he turns into a player, great, you keep him around. If not, he's a free agent, a former first-round pick. Maybe you get a comp pick in return if he signs elsewhere.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Specifically, back to Bryant, just because I find this fascinating. Do you think he is just this incredibly raw, outrageous talent that even 10 years removed from draft day still warrants this type of discussion? Or do you think this is the ultimate much ado about nothing? This dude hasn't played in 6 years.
I don't think it's either, really. I don't think you can be super raw and have the college career he did and the 3 active seasons he did in Pittsburgh. I think had he stayed on a straight course, he would have been a really solid receiver for some good time. I mean, the suspensions obviously ruined everything. So I don't know that he's really super raw even. He's been out of the league for quite some time. I don't know. And, I don't know that the fan controlled league or the XFL and there were limited games there too. So you can't replicate the NFL in that. So it is a good bit of time, and he's a 32-year-old receiver at this point. I also don't think this is a total, nothingness. I think from what we showed, it was very limited. I mean, it was 2 team reps and really
had him here in the
individual
spring.
Reps. Yeah, I mean, he just I think there's still something there, and it's similar to Jamin. He is sort of the prototype size that you would want in a receiver, so it makes sense to kind of see what he still has. But I don't think this is a total, shot in the dark in this one. I think it's more of can he stay healthy, not just physically, but also mentally, and kind of keep himself on the straight path to be able to be available in the game. Yeah.
I think those are all tremendous questions. We're talking with our friend Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post. You can follow her at Nicki Jhabvala, NICKI JHABVALA. Answer something for me as we head to Miami next for the joint practice and then the preseason game. Who needs a really good game here? Because some decisions are really starting to be made. Dan Quinn's openly talking about where he is in the evaluation process. Who really needs a good game? And I'm not talking about Forbes, because whether or not he's a starter He seems fairly firmly on the roster. I'm not talking about Jamin because I think he's on the roster. What are some names you think that need to fight their way on?
You want good games to earn a roster spot, good games?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, I think a guy like Chris Rodriguez might fill that bill. You know what I mean? There are people that are draft picks. Right.
Yeah, literally everybody in the bottom half of the receivers room. Bryson Tremaine continue to build on a good camp. Can he push his way into that final roster spot? Jamison Crowder, because if he can really show out in special teams too, that really makes a strong case for taking that final receiver spot because he can double up as a returner. I think anybody that they're using on a kickoff returns because they're clearly still experimenting there. I mean, they used 3 guys last game. I wouldn't be surprised if they used 3 different guys. Maybe they use the same 3. But, can one of them really stand out? I think anytime you can stand out in like a crowded room, like the safeties room, Tyler Owens with that big special teams tackle, he's one. If he can continue to build on that, anybody in that group too. I would even put Derek Forrest in that category. I mean, I think he'll make the roster at this point, but it's still a crowded room. He's been out the past week because of a hamstring injury. Can he? And I use the word flash. I mean, I know Dan Quinn has used it with a negative connotation, but I mean, to really make yourself memorable and stand out, can he do that in this game? He certainly had regular season games like that and training camp practices in the past. Can he do that again here? Percy Butler in the same boat. Honestly, you could put any of the holdover guys from the last 4 years, sadly. I mean, and there are guys who are going to make the roster anyway, but you still would like to see a little bit more. Like Benjamin St-Juste is one. I would like to see a little bit more out of him. He's been a starter for a couple of seasons now. There are some penalty issues there, technique issues there. I would like to see if he's a little bit different. I don't know that we would in maybe limited reps that starters are probably going to get. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I would like to see more from Luke McCaffrey. He's going to make the roster, but I would like to see a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to circle it back to Brian, I kind of wonder if Luke had looked great or if the other receivers that were just like breaking through and making all these crazy plays, I feel like they wouldn't feel the need to go sign a dude like Martavis. You know what I mean? And that's not to say he can't.
Maybe they wouldn't feel as compelled, but I also, if Dan Quinn really is about competition, as he's said repeatedly for the last 6 months, I don't think there's any downside in bringing him in and just sizing him up against what you have anyway. Because I do think Bryson Tremaine has really showed out over the last week or two. He's still young and raw, but, he is a bigger receiver. I think even if you have your set guys, there's no downside in just seeing what somebody has at this point. That's the beauty of this time of year.
Yeah. To me, this is a no-brainer, but I'll ask you the question. Better chance 4 running backs make this roster or 4 tight ends make this roster?
Is it a no-brainer? I don't know. To me, it comes down to
I think it's tight end by a mile.
Yeah, unless you want one of those backs on special teams as a returner. I mean, they haven't really been using them. So, but yeah, I would think you'd want 4 tight ends, especially if you don't have a bigger receiver like a Bryant on there. I think you're going to need that size. What 4 tight? I mean, you're almost to be Ertz, Sinnott, John Bates, Yankoff.
Honestly,
lately,
I think
Turner lost his mind on blocking.
I think the way Turner showed up physically the other day really stands out because we know what kind of route runner and good hands he's been over the years, but the physical side has been the question, and it seems like he's trying to answer that bell, And I think
has he done it enough
consistently
though?
We don't know that, but he's got a big chance Saturday night.
Yeah, that's true.
I think Yankoff, to me, I mean, I will confess, left hand up. I was drawn to Yankoff because I thought his last name was kind of funny.
I know. I paid attention to him. Think of the headlines. So, yeah.
Right. Totally. But dude, since rookie mini camp, he has stood out to me in a positive way. Making plays, making catches, willingness to, block specials, any of it. I thought this with Hartman too. I thought those guys were almost practice squad locks as camp has been going on. But I would put Turner a little ahead of him. I think Ertz, I think we that are watching day after day after day see the role that Ertz has in this offense, and it's shaping up to be a big one, frankly.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think they want Ertz out there in any clear blocking situations. I think they really want to try to manage his physicality.
You don't have to be out there sometimes.
Of course, but I think when they can, they don't want him out there, and I think that might be why they have a real chance at 4 tight ends.
I could see that would be why they have a chance of 4 tight ends. I could see that as a reason why they would want to scour the waiver wire when rosters are paired to maybe see what else is out there before they settle on that 4th tight end. I'm not as sold on Cole Turner's physicality as you guys are. I've seen too many.
We saw it the other day. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's fair. I feel like there have also been so many plays where you just look up and he's like on the ground. And I think he's a young quality player that just needs development and maybe a little bit more time in the weight room. But
it's interesting I think to that point. Coming into the season, I put Turner and De'Ami Brown in my same bucket of I need to see it on the field before I can buy it, because I've seen it in practice, and in practice, the no matter how hard they're going in practice, it's not like the game. And do you trust your eyes so far more on De'Ami then? Do you believe what you're seeing with him? Because he's having a great camp.
No, and I honestly, this is where I kind of, and I don't say I don't distrust it, if that makes sense. Like, I just know he's peaked in other camps too. Like he's really good at becoming a camp star. It's still a question, even after camp, can he translate this consistently in games? And I feel like in the regular season, his really true highlight game is still that Tennessee game where he had 2 touchdowns. But
that's the only highlight game.
Yeah, exactly. So we've seen him be the training camp star before. So that's why I'm not totally sold. It's not that I don't believe he can translate it. I haven't seen that, but I have seen this training camp part of it. So I'm still a little skeptical.
I like him a little bit because he does it in practice and on the field during the game.
He looks comfortable out there. Yeah. And he does, Jaden made that comment after the game last week, talking about his 42-year-old throw the check to De'Ami, and he said, plays like that gives guys like him and others confidence. And I think that's absolutely true. I think that's the one thing you can see in De'Ami is he looks and he plays much more confidently. I don't think we've seen that in the last few years. And I think that could be said of a lot of young players. There was so much turnover on both the roster and coaching staff in recent years that I think it would be hard to really establish anything for anybody. But he seems to be in a good spot. I think getting some early work with Jaden Daniels at Oregon when Marcus Mariota took all the guys out there, I think that helped quite a bit. This is the first time you feel like the quarterback has like a really solid rapport with all the receivers, because at times it's been like, well, he's not quite clicking with Terry, he's not quite clicking with Jahan, or he's good with this guy, not good with this guy. And I mean, is there a guy that Jaden? This isn't to say like he's been flawless or perfect, but he does seem to have a good rhythm with pretty much all the guys. It feels like there's not one that stands out where it's like, ooh, they really need to, get in some extra time post practice.
Nicki, we always appreciate you, man. Thanks for making time.
Of course. Thanks, guys.